Now, back in the early 80s, Stallone had done a couple of Rocky movies and his cachet in Hollywood was on the rise, but he was not yet the action icon he would grow to be by the end of the decade. At this point in his early career, he was still sort of growing into a character actor, taking on a variety of different roles. One of those would be his turn as the streetwise NYPD cop Deke Da Silva in a taut, gritty crime thriller, and looking back at it all these years later, this film really does mark an interesting departure from the typical Stallone cinema he'd later be known for, as he delivers what I consider to be one of his more underrated roles. So, in this episode of 80s Rewind, we're stepping back in time to 1981 to talk about Nighthawks. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, this is Movies Never Say Die. I'm Anthony DeJoya, and this is your home for 80s and 90s retro movie content. And Nighthawks has always been a favorite movie of mine. I think it still holds up great all these years later. It effectively combines elements of a police procedural with a character-driven thriller. It lines it with plenty of psychological tension to tell the story of a New York City cop trying to get in the way of a terrorist's deadly plans. It's a simple premise, yet highly effective for delivering entertaining cinema. However, just because I said simple is not to say this script isn't lined with enough substance to carry the runtime. The plot centers on Detective Deke Da Silva, played by Stallone. He's a seasoned, emotionally complicated New York City cop with a somewhat unconventional approach to his law enforcement tactics. Deke really rides on his street smarts and is deeply invested in his job, but he's also struggling with a lot of personal issues. He does have a somewhat strained relationship with his partner, Sergeant Matthew Fox, played by Billy D. Williams. They definitely have a strong respect for one another, but they don't always see eye to eye, and I think this dynamic really does just provide this story with an interesting counterpoint to the more conventional tropes of the genre. It really just humanizes these guys as a couple of regular dudes with common flaws and just dynamics between each other. Deke's personal life is a bit messy as well, being separated from his wife, and I think all of these emotional struggles make him a more grounded and complex character, which is really a far cry from the action hero that Stallone usually embodied much after this movie. Now, a movie like this is only as good as its villain, and Nighthawks delivers really a scene-stealing one with Rutger Hauer's performance as the international terrorist Wolfgar. This guy is sophisticated, he's brutal, he's highly motivated, and he brings his wave of terror to the Big Apple. And I think really Hauer provides this movie with a fun, unpredictable villain whose menacing yet charismatic presence does make him the perfect counterpart to Stallone's more grounded and normal character.
You really are very pretty.
Well, thank you.
I think Hauer's portrayal of Wolfgar adds a fun layer of depth to the film. He isn't just a mindless killer, but he's a man with purpose and capability, even if his goals are completely warped. His unnerving calm and ruthlessness, I think, make him a formidable adversary for Deke, because you feel like he can actually pull off his deadly plans. But just because Hauer is fantastic in this movie doesn't mean that Stallone isn't great as well, because I think he too does bring this movie a strong leading performance.
Yeah, I guess so. Why? Because that standing over there.
Stallone plays Deke Da Silva with a subtle vulnerability that was really rarely seen from him much after his career at this point. Stallone's portrayal is really the far cry from the typical stoic and unstoppable action hero, and instead Deke is deeply human. He's grappling with self-doubt and tension with those around him in his life. I think all of which just adds emotional weight to this high-stakes thriller, while also making their inevitable showdown much more anticipated. So front and center, what Nighthawks gives you is a couple of characters that are each compelling in their own way, and it drops them into this tried and true plot that really does allow for a solid game of cat and mouse. Then you get the film's dark, moody aesthetic to really enhance the tension and just pull you into the story, with New York City itself serving as a character. During the time period of this film's production, New York was pretty run down and it was heavily infested with crime. So I think Nighthawks just came down to great location scouting over production design, which I think shows in many of the shots. The streets are shadowy, they're often grimy, the buildings are run down, it's just littered everywhere, and the cinematography by James Contner really just, I think, captures the urban sprawl of the city with an almost noir-like quality. There's a graininess to the visuals of this movie, and I think with the camera movements and the framing of the shots, there's just a cool 70s vibe to Nighthawks that I love. Now, many people would consider Nighthawks to be an action flick, but to me it's much more of just a methodical crime thriller. Malmuth doesn't rush the action here. Instead, he allows the film's story and the tension to build slowly, with the relationships between Deke and his partner Fox and his marital complications to kind of unfold naturally alongside the escalating threat posed by Wolfgar. So where some action movies are all about that pop of violence, I think Nighthawks is all about the buildup.
Take the shot!
He's not clear.
Fun fact, Stallone actually had a hand in the editing process and was reported to have cut some of Hauer's scenes out of the movie for fear that he was stealing the spotlight. Stallone also wrote extra scenes for his own character during filming, and when Nighthawks had to be cut down to prevent it from earning an X rating and to be shortened from its 2.5-hour runtime, many of Stallone's more dramatic and emotionally driven scenes were also cut, which to no surprise, Stallone was highly displeased with. Now, Nighthawks does have a few weaknesses. It's not a perfect film. The pacing can feel uneven at times, especially during the second act. This, to me, is where the narrative just kind of lulls, as Deke is essentially hunting Wolfgar across the city, but really nothing impactful happens for a long stretch. And this is where the story, to me, kind of feels like it's meandering a bit, which I have no doubt is where the heavy edits to this movie were made, because you can just kind of feel there are multiple stretches of filler that are stitched together, with, I think, the original scenes serving as the pop of suspense or violent action being removed to bring the gore and violence level down for the MPAA rating. Also, a lot of the secondary characters get little to no development. To me, almost everybody else in this movie kind of feels one-dimensional in comparison to the rich central character arcs of Stallone and Hauer. And additionally, while the film does make attempts at exploring Deke's personal struggles, it sometimes feels like his character development is a bit choppy and sort of kind of littered into the story, which could be again the result of the heavy edits, but still, it is a nuisance in the version that we did get. Despite these minor flaws, though, I think Nighthawks is a solid thriller with strong performances and a fun final act filled with just awesome practical action. These scenes still look cool today, and the finale with the Silva outsmarting Wolfgar is still a satisfying closing. I think Nighthawks is a rare 80s gem, offering not only tension-filled sequence of action and suspense, but also an effective emotional intensity that I think elevates it above many of its contemporaries. And although Nighthawks didn't achieve the same iconic status as Rocky or Rambo for Stallone, it is a well-crafted, highly engaging film that deserves more recognition and holds up better than many of Stallone's bigger commercial films. And that's it for today, guys. That concludes this episode of 80s Rewind, diving into Nighthawks. Let me know what you guys think of this movie down in the comments. Are you a Nighthawks fan? Do you think it's overrated? I'd love to hear your guys' take on this movie. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video and all my other videos. I greatly appreciate all of you guys. Be on the lookout for my next video coming around the corner real soon. I hope to see all of you back for that one. And until then, movies never say die.
This is Jack Burton in the Pork Chop Express, and I'm talking to whoever's listening out there.
Flag of war. You gotta become war.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
You trying to say Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?